Greetings Exiles, Lexi here with my Chaos Thor Lich build for Path of Exile 2. This new build has become my favorite speed farmer due to its satisfying chain explosions that clear entire screens of enemies. The single target damage is also insane, capable of deleting max difficulty pinnacle bosses in a couple of seconds. When I saw the massive buffs to Mjolner in patch 021, I wanted to utilize the weapon in a build focused on dealing damage with lightning spells instead of attack damage. Before you nerds say, actually, this build is carried by Trample Toe, and it's a Trample Toe build, not a Mjolnir build. Lightning Warp triggered from Mjolnir kills all enemies in its area without Trample Toe equipped. Trample Toe is simply used to chain the Lightning Warp damage to further enemies, and it would be unoptimal not to include it for clearing. You can clearly see the damage output of Lightning Warp while in single target boss fights. Fair warning, the Thor Lich is an advanced build with strict requirements. Dual Mjolnirs are equipped for maximum lightning spell triggers, along with other required unique items to optimize the build. Mjolnir comes with high strength and intelligence requirements, so make sure you obtain the necessary attributes outlined in the passive tree and on gear. Pay close attention to the build's damage scaling and defensive layers to ensure that it functions properly. If you're looking for a starter build, I recommend playing my Frostbolt Comet Blood Mage first to begin endgame maps, as it can be set up on a low budget. Once you farm enough currency, you can switch your Ascendancy from Blood Mage to Lich by redoing your highest trial cleared. In this video, I'll first cover the build mechanics, including damage scaling and defensive layers to ensure you understand what is needed. Then I'll break down the skill rotations for clearing maps and killing bosses. The rest of the video covers the entire build setup, including skill gems, passive skill tree, and gear. Stay tuned into the end of the video for bonus gameplay footage. Let's get started. Mjolnir unlocks Thundergod's Wrath, which gains energy when you hit enemies with melee attacks and triggers socketed lightning spells on reaching maximum energy. Ball Lightning and Lightning Warp are the socketed skills triggered by Thundergod's Wrath to deal the majority of damage output in this build. Leap Slam and Mace Strike are the melee attacks used to generate energy for Thundergod's Wrath. The amount of energy generated by melee attacks is modified by the percentage of the enemy's ailment threshold the hit will deal. So increasing Leap Slam and Mace Strike damage results in more triggers to increase DPS. Therefore, the Thor Lich focuses on damage scalars that apply to both melee attacks and spells utilized in the build. Attack damage and spell damage are not as effective because they don't apply to all the skills. A stat that does work well is increased damage with hits against enemies that are on low life. A massive amount of 420% increased damage with hits against enemies that are on low life is allocated in the passive skill tree. Also, damage with hits is lucky against enemies that are on low life. This double roll is especially beneficial for lightning damage due to its wider damage range. Enemies usually have to be at 35% of their maximum life or less to count as being on low life, but the deepest tower is equipped to apply the low life bonuses at all times. Another valuable scaler for all the skills is extra chaos damage, which is obtained from weapon runes and unholy might from the Lich's Ascendancy. Trample Toe is equipped for additional explosions when dealing overkill damage to enemies. The increased damage and extra chaos damage sources mentioned earlier also scale these explosions from Trample Toe. An interesting feature causes these scalers to be applied each time an enemy is killed, triggering a chain reaction that results in the screen-wide clearing seen in the gameplay footage. The last build mechanic for damage scaling is enabled by Original Sin, converting all elemental damage to chaos damage. This unique ring synergizes well with the extra chaos damage in the build. Enemies also tend to have less chaos resistance than lightning resistance, and Withered can be applied to enemies to make them take 50% increased chaos damage. Proper defenses are necessary for the Thor Lich to survive while leaping into packs of enemies. Multiple layers of defense drastically improve survivability to make this build feel tanky. Life and Energy Shield are combined for a high effective hit pool. A body armor is equipped to grant base evasion rating and energy shield, and then both stats are scared by hybrid nodes in the passive skill tree. If you value survivability over speed, use my defensive setup outlined in the passive skill tree for as much as 3500 energy shield and 6600 evasion rating. Persistent buffs are also utilized for defense, since the build already has more than enough damage output. A temporal chain's aura activated by blasphemy slows enemies down to make it difficult for them to land hits. Wind Dancer provides more evasion rating and knocks enemies back when they hit you. The skill rotations are fairly simple compared to some of my other builds. For mapping, just leap slam into groups of enemies to trigger lightning warp and trample toe explosions. The landing animation for leap slam can be cancelled by dodge rolling to cover more ground, but be careful doing this in difficult content as it can get you killed. An optional blink swap tech can help speed up farming. Map bosses should be easy to kill by activating Mana Tempest and repeating mace strikes. No skill or weapon swapping needed. Against pinnacle bosses, a maximum damage rotation can be executed. Before a boss spawns, precast Despair supported by Curse to Ground. Cast Firestorm to apply critical weakness from an Effigy of Cruelty in the second weapon slot. Swap back to weapon set 1 and activate Mana Tempest. Once the boss spawns, start swinging with Mace Strike. Let's take a quick moment to look at the applied debuffs after the first hit. Chaos resistance has been lowered by 34% as soon as the boss spawns. Firestorm has applied 2.5% critical weakness from Effigy of Cruelty and will continue to stack to 10% over time. The first swing of Mace Strike has applied 20% Withered, which will only take a second to stack to 50%. The first Lightning Warp has applied a shock with increased magnitude to increase damage taken by 50%. A total of 30 million damage is dealt with a couple more swings. Let's cover the skill gems for the Thor Lich. All the support gems for each skill will be listed on the right side in order of priority. The dual-wielded Mjolners grant 2 Thundergod's Wrath skills, which trigger socketed skills when melee attacks generate enough energy. The first Thundergod's Wrath triggers Ball Lightning, supported by a scatter shot to fire 3 projectiles at a time. Ball Lightning isn't relied on to deal damage, so Blind is socketed for utility, and Deceleration keeps you from warping too far away from bosses. In the second Thundergod's Wrath, 2 Lightning Warps are socketed for a total cast time of 1 second. This matches the 1 second cast time of Ball Lightning, so both Thundergod's Wrath skills will trigger upon gaining 100 energy. Make sure that the Ball Lightning trigger is set up above the Lightning Warps. This order ensures that the Ball Lightning triggers first to fire 3 projectiles with Scattershot, and then 2 of the projectiles are consumed by Lightning Warps. To confirm that the order of operations is working correctly, you should see only 1 remaining Ball Lightning projectile after the triggers. You might occasionally see more projectiles remaining if Lightning Warp targets enemies within calling range. My Lightning Warps are increased to level 35 to scale their base damage. Execute provides a massive 50% more damage against enemies that are on low life, which always applies due to the deepest tower. Zenith grants 30% more damage, as you should always be above 90% of your maximum mana due to triggered skills from Thundergod's Wrath having no cost. There are 2 melee attacks utilized to trigger the dual Thundergod's Wraths. Remember that the energy generated for triggers is modified by the percentage of the enemy's ailment threshold the hit will deal, so you need to increase the damage of your melee attacks for consistent triggers. For clearing groups of enemies, Leap Slam supported by Magnified Effect deals damage in a wide area. Momentum, Rage, and Heft increase damage for more energy generation. Holy Descent creates consecrated ground to regain life, since the life flask is used to recover energy shield instead with Eternal Youth. Against elites and bosses, Mace Strike, supported by Martial Tempo, attacks faster for higher single target damage. Concentrated Effect and Close Combat increase its damage. Withering Touch applies a debuff on your target, causing them to take up to 50% increased chaos damage. Ruthless can quickly heavy stun bosses if you need more time to beat them down. Hits against bosses have a 20 times multiplier to energy generation, so it should be easy to deal enough damage to trigger your skills with every Mace Strike. Check that your buff icons for Thundergod's Wrath stay at 0% during boss fights to confirm that they are triggering on every swing. Moving on to the Spirit Gems, Blasphemy, Overwhelming Presence, and Wind Dancer are activated while mapping. These persistent buffs, along with precision, require a total of 124 spirit, so you need an extra 24 spirit on a corrupted helm or an amulet. If you don't have the extra 24 spirit, you need to remove Wind Dancer from the build. Make sure you apply quality to your Blasphemy skill gem to reduce its reservation by 6 spirit. Blasphemy and Wind Dancer are important to increase survivability. Temporal Chains is slotted into Blasphemy to create an aura to slow enemies. Wind Dancer grants up to 30% more evasion rating. It also causes an explosion when hit by an enemy that can often wipe out groups of enemies before you even attack them. Overwhelming Presence lowers enemies' ailment threshold, which causes more energy generation for triggers. An optional Blink Swap tech can be utilized for speed farming. Blink's cooldown is reduced by Ingenuity. The cooldown can be further reduced by equipping a Crest of Eldora and allocating cooldown passive nodes for the second weapon set. Second Wind enables 2 charges to be used at a time. For this setup, set Blasphemy to be active for both weapon sets. Overwhelming Presence and Wind Dancer are only used with weapon set 1. Blink is set to only be used with weapon set 2. You can then weapon swap to cast Blink twice, and then swap back to your Mjolnirs. The remaining skills are used against bosses for more damage output. For map bosses, you should only need to cast Mana Tempest before attacking with Mace Strikes. Mana Tempest empowers lightning warps to gain extra lightning damage, along with 15% more damage from premeditation. Usually, casting skills while in Mana Tempest will rapidly drain mana. Mace Strike and Thundergod's Wrath triggers have no cost, so you can continue to swing forever. Despair and Firestorm are utilized against the toughest pinnacle bosses for maximum damage output. Despair is a curse that reduces enemy chaos resistance, supported by cursed ground so it can be precast before a boss spawns. Enemies can only be affected by one curse at a time, so you must deactivate Blasphemy to use Despair. Firestorm is cast to apply critical weakness with Effigy of Cruelty equipped in the second weapon set. Pinpoint Critical and Inevitable Critical increase Firestorm's crit chance to apply stacks of critical weakness faster. Overabundance and Unleash allow it to be double cast for 2 stacks. Set Firestorm to only be used with weapon set 2. This is the base setup of the passive tree, containing the essential nodes for the Thor Lich build. Character level 75 is needed to obtain these nodes. If you're under level 75, you might not be able to make the build work. Make sure you use attribute nodes to fulfill your intelligence and dexterity requirements, and then allocate the rest as strength for maximum life. Mjolner has high strength and intelligence requirements that are difficult to meet, so this long pathing is necessary to reach the attribute cluster at the bottom of the tree. Polymathing increases attributes by 7%, and then attribute requirements are reduced by 12%. Jack of all trades provides 30% increased damage or more if you pump dex higher than 76. I also included some damage nodes in the base setup that might not seem essential but provide an additional 70 attributes. You'll most likely need these nodes to meet the strict attribute requirements of the build. Eternal Youth converts the Life Flask to recover Energy Shield instead. The final nodes of the base setup are damage increases against low life enemies, which the Deepest Tower keeps active at all times. These nodes are borderline required due to the massive difference they make by scaling both melee attacks and spells utilized in the build. A From Nothing Diamond Jewel allows the low life nodes within the radius of Unwavering Stance to be allocated. After completing the base setup, you can choose to focus on speed or survivability. This is the balanced speed farming setup that I've been using. 5 points are spent on increasing damage output. Spectral Ward and nodes leading up to it provide evasion and energy shield. Shimmering, Acceleration, and Adrenaline Rush nodes increase movement and attack speed for faster mapping. Finally, Presence area of effect is increased by 40% to apply the Deepest Tower to enemies further away, making them count as being on low life. If you're having trouble surviving, you can trade the speed nodes for more evasion and energy shield. If you're utilizing the Blink Swap tech, you can use weapon set points to recover Blink's cooldown faster. Allocate the low life damage nodes with skill points in weapon set 1, and then use weapon set 2 points to obtain all the nearby cooldown nodes. This is my final speed farming setup with the Blink Swap tech at level 95. My last passive tree to show you is the maximum damage setup to kill the most challenging pinnacle bosses. This setup trades speed and survivability for all the crit nodes if you want to burst down bosses as fast as possible. These are the jewels I use the most for speed farming content. Prism of Belief provides up to 3 skill levels for Lightning Warp. Plus 2 skill level jewels are much cheaper than plus 3 if you're on a lower budget. Search for Unwavering Stance on a From Nothing Diamond Jewel. The rest of the jewels are rare with crit damage, crit chance, and area of effect for clearing, and maximum energy shield for survivability. Ensure that your best rare jewel is inserted into the Lich's Ascendancy socket to double its stats. For the maximum damage setup to kill pinnacle bosses, you can replace the prefixes on the rare jewels with magnitude of shock and/or ailments. This is the gear for my Thor Lich character. The dual Mjolnirs prioritize 4 levels of all lightning skills, and then a highly rolled increased physical damage value. Ensure that it has 20% quality to increase the base damage further. Finally, higher increased attack speed is beneficial for faster leaps and mace strikes. You can get up to a base level 19 for Thundergod's Wrath, but it isn't as important as the other stats. An extra level for Thundergod's Wrath would give me a slightly higher increased energy gain, and the trigger damage would go from 260% to 270% increased damage, which is less than 3% more overall damage output. Corruption can grant 2 different notable benefits to the weapons. The best option for single target damage output is a corrupted plus 5 to level of all lightning skills. I prefer a corrupted extra socket on both of my weapons for 26% extra chaos damage, which is better for scaling the damage of chained explosions from Trample Toe. The deepest tower makes enemies in your presence count as being on low life, to enable the massive damage increases in the passive skill tree setup. A corruption mod of at least 24 spirit allows Wind Dancer to be activated in addition to the other spirit gems in the build. You can also get the 24 spirit on your amulet instead. Socket a Bear Talisman for 8% increased area of effect. Original Sin is crucial to convert all elemental damage to chaos damage. Corruption can add up to 10% elemental resistances, which can be very helpful since capping resistances is difficult with all the equipped unique items. If you don't need that elemental res, increased damage is beneficial to scale both melee attack and lightning warp damage. The final unique item is Trample Toe to chain explosions from outside of the lightning warp range. I slotted a rune for movement speed, but increased presence area of effect to apply low life to enemies from the deepest tower is a cheaper option. On the rare amulet, you need a high amount of all attributes to meet requirements. Look for 2 or 3 levels of all spell skills to increase lightning warp damage. You can then focus on evasion rating and maximum energy shield, with Carapace Catalyst applied to increase their stats by 20%. The suffixes on the rest of the rare gear should cap resistances or provide any needed attributes. The body armor is the largest source of evasion and energy shield in the build. I prefer the Falconeer's jacket for 5% increased movement speed, but a sleet jacket can provide a higher amount of base defenses. Maximum life is a priority on the rare ring, gloves, and belt. The ring and gloves can provide flat damage to attacks for generating more energy with Leap Slam and Mace Strike. Lightning damage is the best type due to its wide damage range, benefiting the most from lucky hits. You'll need a good amount of accuracy rating on the gloves to ensure a 100% hit chance. I haven't noticed the physical attack leech does life to be doing much. Attack speed and crit damage are also options on the gloves if you don't need any more resistances or attributes. I recommend a rawhide belt to increase life recovery from flasks, which work on energy shield with Eternal Youth. If you're using the Blink Swap tech, equip a Crest of Ardura in Weapon Set 2 to provide increased cooldown recovery rate. Additional cooldown recovery in the passive skill tree is also obtained to reduce Blink's cooldown for faster mapping. Against pinnacle bosses, switch to an Effigy of Cruelty to apply critical weakness using Firestorm. Pair the unique focus with the crit chance wand to stack critical weakness quickly. Moving on to consumables, equip flasks with increased amount recovered and increased charges. Thawing and stone charms are the most helpful to survive. If you have a third slot available, a staunching charm is useful because bleed damage bypasses energy shield. I'll leave you with some bonus gameplay footage for the Thor Lich. The written guide will be available at PoE Vault, and I'll provide the link in the video description once I've finished working on it. If you learned something new in this video, you owe it to me to hit that subscribe button. Until next time, peace out and happy slaying.
For this world.